Welcome to a live edition of PokerStatic.com. Bret Oliverio, Eric Bickel, and of course Jason Senti, who's a member of the November 9. It's got a nice little ring to it, doesn't it, Jason?
Sounds all right, I guess.
Congratulations, man. I don't even know where to begin. As soon as you make the final 9 and that sort of that feeling of euphoria, do you realize right then and there that your life has changed?
Absolutely not. I didn't. I really didn't think it through, which probably isn't the right thing to say, but I just really, really wanted to make it. Knew it was really important to get to the 9. Never really thought it was going to happen until we were down to like 13 players. And at that point, I decided, wow, I really got to make sure I hit this. Then I did, and it was all crazy. Had cameras everywhere and taking a lot of pictures. And, you know, I'd been up for, I don't know, I probably had slept a total of 3 hours out of the last, like, at least 48 hours. And I was in pretty tough shape at that point. And they were just throwing ESPN cameras in front of me and things like that. And I was doing interviews. And, yeah, it wasn't really until, like, the next day when I went back, and that's when they really started just throwing me in front of, you know, camera crews and all this stuff for individual interviews and photo shoots for Bluff and all this stuff. That's when things felt really crazy. I was like, wow, I don't think I really thought this through. I think things are going to change a little bit for a while here.
Right.
You know what? You were so calm. I mean, I was following you on Twitter. That's how I was getting all my updates, because obviously your tweets came before Poker News or any sites like that. And you were like so calm. There's 10 players left, and you're like, I'm the short stack, need some run good. I'm like, oh my God, if I'm 10th, you know, if I'm about to bubble the November 9, or there's a chance I could, I'm going to be going crazy.
Right.
But you seem like you were so like calm and collective through that final table.
I definitely did my best. I mean, obviously I played a lot of poker at this point. When I'm in hands, I feel very comfortable. I actually getting deep into the tournament, occasionally when I'd walk away on breaks and things, I actually got a little bit nervous, which isn't something I'm used to. I've, played a lot of shows with my band and things like that, and I don't typically get all that nervous. It's not that big of a deal. But I would get a little nervous on breaks, thinking about, wow, now it's getting important. But then I'd sit down at the table and think about it. In this spot, near the end, I'm sure I was a little more nervous than pretty much any situation I had been in before, simply because it was a spot I had never been in. I hadn't talked to anybody about being in it. The closest thing to compare it to when down to 10 is like a satellite, because it really is important to get to the 9, and it was, it's on the biggest stage of that poker has. So, I don't know, a little bit, but mostly I just sat down and was really, really thinking hard about the strategy I could use in this given situation. Like, I really couldn't attack anybody who could bust me easily, and it wouldn't hurt them if they doubled me. So I had to be constantly monitoring chip stacks, seeing who I could get chips from, because they'd be afraid to play back, things like that. So I was pretty much focused the whole time.
Now, why don't we talk about exactly who you are if people don't know you? Of course, you're an instructor at Blue Fire Poker, and you're mainly a PLO player. I know we went out to dinner before the main event, and, you spent years and years just pretty much collecting money at the No Limit Hold'em games, and you transitioned to PLO, and it just seems like you're a solid freaking just cash game specialist. Is that safe to say?
I'd like to think of myself that way. Yeah, I've been playing No Limit cash since about the fall of 2006. I like to joke on occasion that I picked the absolute wrong time to start doing that. So that was right when the UIGEA went through and things, apparently got tougher. That's when I started playing some No Limit cash. I played a little bit of Limit Hold'em before that and just stonked around the tournaments. And that year I took it really seriously, really got into it, and found that I was making more money there than at my job. I was an electrical engineer at the time. And about a year later, so fall of 2007, became a professional poker player. And yeah, I've been, I guess for about 2 years, I pretty much played entirely No Limit cash. Mostly 510 through 2550, some a little higher, really nothing lower than 510 over that 2-year span, and both heads up and 6-max, I guess. And then, yeah, about a year ago, or man, now it's been longer than that, about a year and a half ago, I started playing primarily PLO, and PLO's been a lot of fun. It was just good to learn a new game. You play a lot of hands. I guess I don't play a lot of hands compared to many real grinders out there, but still, it's fun to mix it up, learn something different, come up with things on my own that I haven't heard other people talk about yet, because by the time, No Limit, that doesn't happen too often anymore. and I was just having a lot of fun with it. The only problem is of course, the variance of PLO is through the roof, and so I've dealt with the swings, or a lot greater swings in PLO than no limit hold'em, and actually considered playing more no limit again lately. Just before the World Series this year, I was feeling about as cash poor as I felt in a while. Still doing fine, have money, but a lot of it tied up in investments, and was starting to play a little bit of 3-6 and mostly 5-10 PLO, thinking, wow, I really got to grind back up when I get home, like, be one of the real grinders and play 40 or 50,000 hands a month for 2 or 3 months. But I instead luck boxed the World Series main event, and
very sick.
That was a little bit easier route, I guess.
Now, what was your live history prior to this? Because mostly you're an online player, but you have some live results. This isn't the first time that you've gone out there and done something.
No, I've played live. Before I was really playing seriously, I played occasionally at a local card room here in Minneapolis called Canterbury Park, but they spread only tournaments up to 1K buy-ins and then limit hold'em. And so I messed around with that and, just got at least some experience there. And then the last 3 summers I've gone out to the World Series. 3 summers ago I played, I'm not sure how many events, maybe 5 to 8, but I had to skip the main event because I was getting married during it. And then last summer I went out and played somewhere between 10 and 15 or 16 events. I don't know the exact number. I'm sure it was at least 12. And didn't cash in anything except, I guess I cashed in one event, the Heads Up, the 10K Heads Up. I've played that. I played that 2 times, 2 years ago and then last summer. And I cashed in that last year, but it was a smallish cash for what it is. I mean, it's a $10,000 buy-in, and I cashed for like 18 or 19,000 and went out in 21st. All the money's at the top in tournaments. And so I've definitely played. This summer I decided to take a lighter World Series calendar or schedule. I, wasn't feeling like going out and dropping $50,000, $60,000 on the World Series again. It really makes things feel tight, and it just, I don't know. Since I hadn't had any sort of big tournament score, it makes it easy to look at it as just something that gets pretty old pretty quickly, and you only want to play so many tournaments. So this year I just went out for the 5K PLO, the 10K PLO, and I definitely wasn't going to miss the main event. And, yeah, I guess the shorter calendar worked out for me this year.
Huh. And then how did you do... I'm sorry, Bret. How did you do in those other events before the main event this year?
The 5K PLO, I went out at the end of day 1. Nothing too eventful. I had a really, really bad table draw. I actually had an issue with, I had all Bellagio chips and couldn't get them approved at the Rio, yada yada. I had played enough World Series of Poker events to know that you don't really want to go in registering late, especially for more difficult fields like, a 10K PLO or a 5K PLO where only so many people play. When you register late, you're going to be pretty much grouped in with everybody else who's comfortable wandering into the Rio an hour and a half late and throwing down $5 grand to play a tournament. Generally, that means pretty good players. So I went out of my way not to register late, had issues, got bailed out by Phil. Actually, he was able to trade with me, and he also had to trade with Z Dang at the time. So I ended up at Z's table, along with, the entire table except one older guy who didn't last very long. The entire table was all very good PLO players. It was Boosted J, guy who's Southside on Full Tilt. I'm not even remembering them all now, but a bunch of very, very good players. And not a lot happened other than I busted at the end of the day. Then I played the 10K PLO a few days later, and I made day 2 with a reasonable chip stack, nothing monstrous, but it was, a decent stack, and busted, gosh, probably 2 levels in. Just didn't go my way. I ended up in a hand that ended up being a really big pot against Vivek Rajkumar, who I've played with. I played with him in the 2500 HA, so the Hold'em and PLO last summer. And I knew he was a really aggro opponent, and so I put the money in pretty light. I'm not really sure I liked the way I played it. It wouldn't really mattered, because the way I would have played the hand would have involved calling his raise on the flop and then shoving the turn when I would have hit a full house. I started the hand, or I had trips on the flop. Without going too much into detail, anyway, I got it in on the flop and was drawing near dead. If I hadn't done it that way, I still would have gone out, but I was still pretty mad for like a day that I misplayed a hand in a way that I think was pretty bad. Whatever, then I went and played the main and went in with, I will say I went in with more focus than I ever have before to a poker tournament. I don't want to say, attribute the results to that. I think people overvalue little things they do in the short term in poker when they have results. They think, oh, this is the time I, got up early every day and worked out and ate and did all this and that. That's why I did well. There's way more variance than that. But it certainly can't hurt and only make it easier for you.
Now, was there any thought to maybe skipping the main event? I mean, because you did say you were sort of low on cash, your money's tied up, and, it is $10K you got to put up, and, the chances of actually making a deep run and collecting a nice chunk of money are pretty slim. Was there any thought to just, let's just get out of Vegas, save my 10 Gs, and get home and start grinding?
Absolutely not. The main event's too awesome. The main event is it's the greatest tournament of the year. It's, a deep structure where you get to play 100 big blinds deep with your competition for like a really good chunk of the tournament. And, that's where I'm going to thrive as primarily a cash game player. I'm pretty confident in my ability to play a 20 big blind stack, like, in a 30 big blind stack like a lot of tournament guys. But at the same time, I, much prefer to play deeper where your skill edge is going to really shine through. And not only is it a tournament with that kind of structure, but it's also the one 10K tournament a year that all the recreational players who can get their hands on $10,000 go play. It's just far, far too soft to consider skipping unless I have something going on like getting married.
Huh. Now, did you ever have any reservations, though, about the fact, and this is what I was most amazed about with Jason, was the fact that you're primarily a PLO player, as you mentioned, at this stage of your career. And then to go back in and play a no-limit hold'em tournament, to have this kind of run, is even more impressive.
Oh, well, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I've played a lot of no-limit hold'em over the years, and it's not really like I'm going to forget it in at least this short a period of time. Like, maybe a lot of the more advanced stuff I'd forget if I hadn't hardly played it in 5 years. But in a year and a half, especially still, I'm still like 10% of my hands maybe come from no limit. So I'm still somewhat fresh on it. And also this isn't even the same situation as playing no limit hold'em cash games. Tournaments are a different animal, but I pretty firmly believe that anybody who's, a good, well-rounded poker player, not somebody who's learned systems and, has rules they do while they play a gajillion tables, and there are good players who play a lot of tables, I'm not saying they can't, but players who really understand how poker works and know what they need to think about can usually be dropped into most poker situations and do pretty well, especially live. You have so much time to think about every decision. I had plenty of time to sit and strategize and think about what I should be doing in each spot.
Huh.
Now, everyone always says if you want a big piece of yourself in one tournament, it's the main event.
Absolutely. I've said it many times.
Yeah, exactly. And here you are, guaranteed almost 900 Gs. And what exactly was your situation like? Did you heed your own advice, or did you start selling yourself off before the tournament?
Well, I really haven't sold my action much in the past at all in anything, cash games or tournaments, which is a little bit of a rarity, but starting this my way this time, I'm pretty sure that was the correct fold in that spot, though, and it turned out to be a lot bigger deal than I realized at the time.
All right, now I want to talk to you about the hand that you blogged about, because, you do have a blog on bluefirepoker.com, and I go to it all the time, especially since you final tabled the main event, and you said, hey, I'm going to play this huge pot or this big hand on ESPN, and I'm either going to look like a genius or a total idiot. So,
Yeah.
Why don't you go through that hand with us?
And I'm pretty sure that Norman Chad, whoever does the commentary, Norman Chad, Lon McCarran, Norman Chad, I'm sure will be the one who cracked jokes about it, will frame me as being an idiot or a nit in this spot. But that's okay. I actually, even knowing what his cards are now, I'm happy with my decision. Basically, I'll do a little build-up here. I had a good stack going into day 8, the last day. I was 4th in chips with $13.5 million. Was feeling really good. Got to play a good number of hands at the beginning of the day. It was up and down. I got up to $15 million pretty quickly in a re-raise pot. Got caught 4-bet bluffing a guy where I 4-bet pre-flop with Jack 4 off, and he shoved on me. Obviously light, too, because he showed a 6 of diamonds. Good for him. That was Matt Jarvis. And I think Matt Jarvis is a very good poker player, by the way. Any case, it was up, down, but I'd gotten up to 18, 19, probably 20 million at some point, and was feeling really good. And then when we got down to 12 players, all of a sudden, I lost 5 decent-sized pots in a row, including doubling up the shortest stack in the tournament, Brandon Stevens, who ended up going out 10th. So all of a sudden, going into the final 10, I think I had 11.5 million or something, and that really was one of the shortest stacks. And so everything had to change with my strategy there. We had a little break, and I walked off and decided to do a bunch of thinking about it, and realized that I kind of have to play this as a satellite here, which is really, really unfortunate. What I mean by that is, for anybody who doesn't ever play satellites, there are situations like if you were in a satellite and the top 20 get paid all the same prize, like a $10,000 buy-in. If there's like 21 or 22 people left and you have some massive amount of chips, like it's impossible for you to be blinded off, it's correct to open fold aces, just because there's no benefit to you playing it. Getting a bigger stack gives you no gain, but
some
the
people
possibility.
might give you some crap for that.
No, it's 100% correct. If you had this massive stack, there's no gain to you playing that hand. Getting a bigger stack doesn't do you any good, doesn't increase your prize, but the chances, or like the times you do lose the hand with aces, which doesn't happen often but will happen, it's catastrophic because you ended up in a situation where you always should have been guaranteed $10,000 and you risked it just because the hand looked pretty or whatever. So this situation wasn't quite like that. It isn't really a satellite. It's important to try and have some chips, but it's very important to reheat the November 9 because of all the other, the overlay of all the other benefits, potential sponsorship and all these other things and the exposure. So I really wanted to hit the 9. Everybody did, though. And I knew that I was in a spot with 3 good players to my left, and they were 3 of the better players at the table, who all had good-sized stacks, and they would know that I'm going to be in this spot. So if it were 3 guys who weren't very good, it'd be different. I would just go in there, especially if the table wasn't very good, and I'd just play a bunch of hands, trying to abuse this final table bubble where everybody's afraid. But in this spot, with me being a shorter stack and them being good players, knowing I have to be careful, I just had to be really tight. And so I was very tight. I saw an interview with Mizrachi where he said it was miserable. He's never folded so much in his life. I 100% feel the same way. I play a lot of hands in the main event where we have deep stacks, and I just folded for hours. Granted, I got almost no cards. But any case, getting to the hand, there was one player at the table, or a couple, but one on my immediate right who I knew was in a similar spot to me. Very similar stack, was not in a situation where he's going to want to put the money in light. Not even close to light. Like, he shouldn't even be all that comfortable putting it in with queens pre. And so I 3-bet him when he opened several times in a row, just because it puts him in that situation. I just had him covered. So I, either didn't look at my cards or look down at rags. It didn't matter. That was one of the few spots I can pick up chips without somebody playing back at me. So I did that several times. Then all of a sudden he shuts down. He doesn't play a hand for like 5 or 6 orbits and opens under the gun. I look down under the gun +1 at 2 queens and decided just to flat pre-flop. 3-betting and getting it in at that time certainly is an option, and I would do it basically any other time in the tournament very happily, considering our stack sizes. But here I really just, the range he will get it in with and continue to play the hand with is going to be like aces, kings, maybe queens and jacks, and then like ace-king. And really, against that range, I'm not doing very well. So do I want to, put myself in a spot where either A, my queens are a bluff because he just folds pre-flop when I raise, or B, all the money just goes in pre and I'm like flipping at best. So
were you worried about someone to act after you that could pick up aces or kings or ship it with ace-king or even ace-queen?
Yeah, that's actually kind of a good situation for me, though, because the people behind me are these good players who know they can abuse both of us. So this is the added benefit of calling. If I call, I assume that the guys on my left will squeeze and 3-bet us pretty often, knowing that we're in a nasty spot and we really can't go with anything but big hands, and that we have to be careful. So me against those guys who will be raising with a wider range, 3-betting, getting it in pre with a much wider range, I'm fine getting it in with queens. I'm not happy to get all in with 10 people left, but with queens against guys who are good players and know how to abuse us there, thumbs up, let's do it. We just got to go for it. So that was an added benefit. I call, everybody folds. Flop comes down. I may have the cards, not perfect, but it was like jack, 7, deuce, 2 diamonds. He c-bet, and I called. Raising on the flop is an option. Once again, though, I think it puts me in actually a pretty similar spot to what would happen pre-flop. I either take the hand down or I get it in against aces, kings, or a big draw, in which case I'm flipping at best again. So I just called and decided to keep playing post-flop poker, and turn was a rag, and he shoves. I'm pretty sure his shove was a little bit of an overbet. If it wasn't, it was like nearly a pot-sized bet, which is big in tournament poker. The average bet size is half pot. So he shipped, and I thought for a long time, once again, I think I'm generally up against a range of aces, kings, maybe queens, maybe ace-jack. I wouldn't expect all players to do it, but later found out this guy gets it in pretty light, or had in the past. But he'd been tight here, so I didn't even know if he'd get it in with ace-jack in this spot. Maybe sets, if he was opening all pairs from early position, and then, you know, like ace-king of diamonds. And
what was the board? What was the board one more time?
It was jack. These might not be perfect cards, but it gives the idea. Jack, 7, deuce, 2 diamonds. Turn was a rag, so it was like a 4 of clubs. Didn't apply to the hand, and he shoved. And it was possible he had a combo draw, like 2 overs and a flush draw, in which case, on paper, I mean, it's a really easy call because I'm getting pot odds and I'm a favorite. So it's like just this great spot. But really, I really sat hard and thought about his range and was like, I can't believe I'm about to fold an overpair here as a short stack on TV. But I think it's the right decision. With basically, I thought the range I'd get it in against is probably flipping at best. You know, because his, you know, a hand like ace-king of diamonds on the turn there has still a good amount of equity. You know, it's going to be something along the lines of like 27, 28% equity. And then also is going to be in his range of sets. Probably not any 2 pairs because he wouldn't have opened them pre-flop because he was being so tight. But sets, overpairs, and draws that I have, you know, 60% equity against, I don't know, that doesn't sound so great as a situation with 10 people left, the, you know, November 9 bubble. So I folded.
What did
he
you
told
think
me
about
later,
his... Hold on a second.
Oh, go ahead.
Before you get to the hand, what did you think about the overbet? Did you put... if he's trying to blow... It's too obvious that he's shoving with ace-high, trying to blow you off the hand. Did you think maybe he had jacks and he's... What was your thought towards the overbet?
I just don't know enough about what he thinks in those spots. In general, overbets, and this is not necessarily, like, great players that you may play, like, a ton of hands with in cash games, all this is different. It's a deep leveling thing. Most people are balanced. But in a tournament, one-off situation, like a situation neither of us are ever going to be in again, if I were to guess, he's going to be either the type of player who is shoving a really nutted hand, like jacks, to make it look like a big draw, a big hand like aces or kings or ace-jack maybe, or queens or whatever, to just try and limit this variance. Like, he really doesn't mind taking this pot down now, because I obviously could be drawing a lot with a hand like 8-9 of diamonds or something, or at least he could think I could be with like a gutter and a flush draw. And this is one of those spots where he's got to be happy taking down the pot, you know, even with a big hand. So it really, I can't read into it enough to really change his range much, because I just don't know enough about him. So in that spot, I used the information I had, and he told me later he had ace-king of diamonds, and I can't be 100% sure of this. I'd have to sit down and try and do some, you know, crazy wizard math where I include sponsorships and all this stuff. But I would not be surprised if his hand was face up as ace-king of diamonds, if it was still actually really close to a fold. As the correct decision. Never in a vacuum of one poker hand, of course, but in this one really weird set of circumstances, you know, the November 9 bubble. So when you take that along with, I also considered in his range pretty much just overpairs and sets, maybe top pair, top kicker, and that's the hand I'm crushing. If that's really in his range, that changes things. But I don't even know if it is. You know, it was the correct fold.
And then what a ballsy bet on his move.
For sure. What did that?
Kind of a ballsy bet. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I'm sorry, Bret. What did that leave you with in chips at that point?
I don't remember exactly. I think it wasn't that bad, actually, because I had just, you know, I had won a hand where I 3-bet him pre-flop not that long before that, and I actually got away with stealing. I guess it had been a few orbits since that. See, I really hadn't played a hand in forever. But I had gotten away with stealing a few hands, including one where I opened, got called from the blinds by, I'm pretty sure the weakest player. I'm pretty sure it was Brandon Stevens. It was really late at this point. I don't have all the details right, but I took down a pot just like with a c-bet on the flop, and really all those little pots were, I mean, they're huge at that point, because, you know, there was like a 50K ante or a 40K ante, and then like, you know, whatever, like 700,000 in there in the blind. So there's like usually $1 million in pre. Then, you know, they make a call. I make it like $1 million or a little less. They call, and then they fold to a c-bet. I mean, that pot's worth over 2 million chips. So I think I'd actually just gotten back up to over like 14 million when this hand started, and I ended up having to fold. bringing me down to maybe like 10 or 9 million, and it was very unfortunate, but I'm pretty sure it was the right decision.
Maybe it was
managed to hang on.
Yeah, and an ace. You river's an ace or a diamond or king, you're cooked. Now, that's kind of a ballsy bet on his part, I would say, because it seems like in that spot, would you have checked the turn? I have a feeling you would have checked the turn and maybe check called the river. Just
well,
I
didn't get the chance to bet the turn. Oh, you mean like if he would have checked?
No, if he would have checked behind and trying to hit his draw, what would you have done there on the turn? It's kind of a ballsy open shove.
It is, but really with the portion of the range that I said I think he has when he does shove the turn, I think it's the best play. I think with an overpair he should just shove. He's got to protect when I'm peeling with draws, and maybe queen jack suited type hands, and he also might get calls from me in those spots, or at least my top pair type hands. If he has like aces or kings, same thing. He never expects me to fold queens. Like, I'm gonna stack off always there, at least most would expect me to. I actually think it's the best play in his spot. If he had exactly ace king of diamonds, I think he made the correct play, and I think I made the correct play, which is pretty unfortunate.
What if he checks there? What do you do? What do you do on the turn when it's checked to you? Do you bet?
If he checks the turn, I actually think it's really close, and I'm not 100% sure what the right decision is. I'm pretty sure I would just end up betting. I don't think I would check behind like you mentioned. Checking behind does limit variance a little bit, of course. It's less likely he can suck out, with an ace-king offsuit type hand or ace-queen offsuit type hand. Or I guess if I bet, that stuff goes away. But if I check, we'll get to showdown pretty cheaply pretty often. He isn't going to check raise me all that often. But really, I think in that spot, he is not checking almost ever with a strong hand, simply because it's so important for him to, get me out of the pot when I have equity, and just bet big when he has aces, and bet big when he has a big draw or a set, and I could be drawing. So because of that, when he checks, I think it's almost always to give up. So my guess is what I would have come to the conclusion of then is that I should bet smallish, probably like 1/3 pot, putting him in a situation where it might actually induce him to do something dumb and check raise me with a pretty weak hand, simply because I look somewhat weak anyway when I bet small there. I look like I could fold. So while that sounds a little funny that I fold to just an open turn shove, but I call a check raise all in, his range changes based on that situation. Him betting makes his range stronger. Him checking makes his range weaker. So it changes how I should react to it.
What was your table image by the other guys? I imagine, and I'm just thinking, as I'm listening to you talk, that you're wearing this Blue Fire poker patch throughout the tournament. It's a little different than wearing like a Poker Stars or a Full Tilt patch. I mean, you're saying I'm an instructor. I'm at one of the premier sites out there. I know what I'm doing. Being somebody that hasn't had a lot of TV time, did you feel like that put you at a little bit of a disadvantage? Like they immediately know I'm an instructor, I'm an online guy.
It does both. It gives you an advantage in some situations, and definitely gives you a disadvantage in others. Basically, earlier in the tournament, I think for most days, with the exception of a few times when I was playing a little bit shorter, probably day 2, and then end of day 6, beginning of day 7. For the most part, I actually think my image was a little bit maniacal, just a little bit crazy. I like to play a lot of hands when I'm deep stacked and feel like I have a big edge over my opponents. And if anything, the Blue Fire patch in those spots helps against amateurs, because amateurs, even if they don't know what Blue Fire is, somebody usually says something at the table, knows who I am, because Blue Fire only has so many instructors, so it's pretty easy to identify me. And I think it can make weaker players maybe fear you a little bit, just because they know that you're going to be good, and that I will, if they bluff me or do certain things, I might soul read them. So in those spots, I think it can actually help. Against better players, it definitely hurts. And my last day at the table, the feature table, with Ms. Rocky and a bunch of other guys. I was playing with other guys during the day earlier too. Earlier in the day, I probably looked a little bit loose and a little bit aggro. I got caught 4-bet bluffing. I played a lot of hands, and they were guys who knew at least a little bit about how I thought. Some of them had seen my videos. Most of them knew who I was, and I didn't necessarily know who they were. So those situations, it definitely kind of hurt. By the time we got to the final table bubble with 10 people, it was very obvious I was playing tight. There's just no way around it. I couldn't fake it any other way, and though I really wouldn't even want to. They're good enough players to know that I have to play tight. Having the Blue Fire patch, or just them knowing who I was and having talked a little poker with me, allows them to know that I know what I'm doing a little bit here. So in that spot, they're going to be able to take advantage of me. I'd rather they thought I was playing tight, so that the few times I do open, they think, well, I guess this guy's always got aces or kings, you know, because I really just wanted to take down some pots on occasion.
Right.
So.
Right. All right, here's what we need to do. We're going to throw out the number here because we do have the opportunity to take calls for Jason. So if anyone has a question about the November 9, his run in the main event, or anything in general for Jason Senti, 301-825-8060. I'll say it again. It's 301-825-8060.
Let me ask you this. Go ahead, Bret.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to ask you,
go ahead.
let's handicap the final table here. And you don't have to talk about each player, but obviously we know your resume. We know about you. The poker world knows about the Grinder. Some of these other guys, you know, we've seen here or there, maybe read their names. But I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, who's the Darvin Moon? Who's the Jamie Gold of this group? Can you characterize any of these guys as that, or is it a different type of field?
This is a different type of field for sure. We don't really have the big luck box donk at this table.
You said it, not me.
Even if we, yeah, we just, you know, I don't really think we have that right now. I think this is one of the tougher final tables that's been around. To be fair, if there really was one player who I thought was really bad, I don't think I'd say it here anyway. So, you know, there's just no benefit to me to do that. But, you know, the truth is, I think for the most part, this table can play. And there's a lot of very good players at this table. And from what I know about Mizrachi, he seems very good, too. And his story's great right now. You know, there was all this press about him having the IRS seize one of his homes in May. Now, obviously, I don't know if that's really true, but that was going around. And then he wins the 50K Players Championship, final tables, like 2 other events this summer, and now final tables of Maine. Like, yeah, he's a great story. You know, like, good for him. And he seems like a really nice guy and a good personality on TV. So, you know, obviously I don't want to go too much into strategy and stuff right now until after November. But, yeah, I think for the most part the table's pretty solid. And me going in there with 15 big blinds, I have my work cut out for me.
Well, let me ask, let's sticking with the Grinder. You know, everyone says he's a nice guy, seems to get along with everyone. I haven't really seen a bad word about him in any of the forums or anyone I've talked to. But I want to ask you about his table presence. He's kind of a bigger guy. You know, he seems to sit upright. I don't know. He seems to have a pretty commanding way about himself at the table. What exactly was it like playing with him? Was it intimidating at all, or have you just played too much poker where it doesn't even cross your mind?
Yeah, I thought about it a little bit just because it's obvious that he likes to be intimidating at the table. And in tournaments, I actually think that can be a pretty good thing. You know, at least against weaker players. Once again, just keeping them in line a little bit. Anyway, he certainly goes for the, hey, I'm going to be intimidating thing. We actually had one hand where we played that. I don't know if it would be shown on ESPN because they came up right after the hand and told me I had a chip stack blocking my whole cam. So that was the only hand that they didn't get my cards on. And it was one of the few hands I played with him where he had now gotten some chips. He didn't really have much for chips before, so I didn't get to really play a bunch of hands with him. When, you know, we got down to 18 players is when I first sat down at the table with him. He was very short, so there wasn't a lot of poker to be played then. Basically, you know, I'd raise and he'd fold, or he'd raise and I'd fold, that kind of thing. But we had one hand after he got in a little bit of chips where it was like a 3- or 4-way hand, and I bet the flop decent size. And in any case, when it got to him, he really took minutes to make the decision, and he really kind of tried to pull the I'm going to intimidate you thing.
And
I cracked some jokes. Yeah. I cracked some jokes about, like, hey, well, I'm putting the sunglasses on, can't have you read my soul, stuff like that. And side note, I'd never really worn sunglasses at the poker table until the end of this. I just decided this thing's far too important to not wear sunglasses out of pride. That's the only reason I don't do it. It's like, oh, I don't need to hide behind sunglasses or some BS like that. But screw that. When we were down to like 18 players, I was just putting them on. You know, why not? And he started, running the whole spiel and acting like he was going to raise and really trying to intimidate me. And all I could think is, like, it's highly unlikely I'm giving anything away here. I've played a lot of poker, a very large amount of poker at this point in my career. It really doesn't have any effect on me. But he was fun to play with. I know that. He eventually did fold, and luckily he won't know what I had, whether I was bluffing or not. I'll tell him after the tournament maybe if he cares to know anymore. It was really bothering him that day, but whatever. I'll tell him later. I don't know. He had a very big crowd of people that were loud and having a lot of fun, and so they were cool to have at the table, and he was joking a bunch, and honestly, generally a very, very nice guy. I talked to him a bit on Sunday, too, when I went back, and we had some interviews and things like that. And he was just really cool and happy to be there.
Was ESPN encouraging you guys to chat it up while you're there at the feature table? What did they say to you as they're miking you up and as they're preparing you? Because you got to figure, okay, this is a different experience. Do I want to be Antonio Esfandiari and Phil Locke, or what do I want to do here?
Yeah, they did not say a word. They didn't try to lean us to do anything in any different direction. I think, at least with this, not necessarily like high-stakes poker and other things like that, which are made-for-TV events, those spots they might tell people, hey, liven it up or you're not going to be on anymore, and I can understand that. The World Series of Poker is different. I think they're trying to, maintain the integrity of the tournament. It's a tournament that they are filming, and that's how it is. They don't really try and affect the tournament too much, as far as I can tell. The way I'll come across on TV as to whether or not I'm chatting too much really is going to depend on when they decide what parts they decide to show coverage. Most of the time when I'm at the table, just because of the way I am, I'm talking pretty much nonstop and joking with everybody and having a lot of fun. I didn't a ton on day 8 because it just was really serious. And maybe one other day when I was short and I was really sick for a few days in there, including actually day 8. I had a pretty rough cold. So it usually depends on my mood, but most of the time I'm pretty jovial and having a lot of fun. I did for a chunk of that feature table, but for a lot of it I was actually really quiet, especially near the end. When we got to 10 people, I was frustrated. I really, really wanted one person to bust, and I was annoyed the blinds were going up and my stack was going down, but this was the best thing for me to do. I had to keep folding and let everybody just, let the big stacks raise every hand and take it down. It was annoying. It was very annoying, to say the least, and I had a really hard time not just finally fighting back. I'm not used to playing poker where I lay down on my back,
Yeah, how long was that,
so
Jason?
I probably wasn't chatty then. That was forever. I don't know. 36 hours, I think we played from 10 to 9. No, it was realistically probably 6 or 7 hours from
oh my
10 to 9
God.
players.
Oh, my God.
And it was really frustrating. It was, such a long period of time, me folding almost every hand. Obviously, I played some hands. It might look like all I did was fold to the, to the final table, but that's impossible. There was like a million going in each orbit. If I'd have done that, I would only lasted like 10 or 12 orbits. But I had to fold a lot. I definitely came out of that with a shorter stack than I went into 10 players with, and yeah, I don't know how much it'll show. I know that while I generally consider myself a very nice guy, I may come across as mean-spirited during that period, and I really hope I don't. It depends on what they decide to show. I wasn't like a complete jerk, but I was really annoyed at that point. It was a really long day, and I just wanted somebody to bust, and I didn't want it to be me.
So what were you doing, snapping at people?
Someone was saying it was 8 hours.
Yeah, it very well could have been 8 hours. I'm not sure. I wasn't snapping at people. I just maybe wasn't as cheerful as normal. I know I rolled my eyes in situations when like a short stack would win a hand, stuff like that. And normally I'm just laughing, having fun with them, especially if I don't think they're the best player. Like I really like chatting a lot with them because, one, not to get too much into the strategy of it, but it's just nice having people who aren't necessarily good at poker making sure they have fun when they're at the table, because in the end they're pretty much my customer, even when it's in a tournament. I want these people to have good experiences and come back. And so I usually like to have fun at the table, and I certainly didn't have that attitude there. It's very possible I didn't really even do anything that'll come across as bad, but I know I at least wasn't very cheerful.
How many times did you stone cold make moves in those 6 or 8 hours?
Oh, very little. In the 6 to 8 hours at the end, I did almost nothing. If you were to ask of the tournament, I mean, a ton. It was a long tournament. There's a lot of hands of poker.
No, but when you were
I
short.
got to play with when I was short, there was almost nothing I could do. Basically, every hand I played, I was stone cold making moves, because each situation that I played was built around the situation, not the cards. Funny enough, I was actually really, really card dead in that spot. I probably almost am happier that I was, because it would have been pretty tough to... Sorry, it looks like you're getting a call or something.
Yeah, let's see who it
loud,
is.
like, ringing.
Yeah, what's up? It's Dale from Scotland here.
Hey, what's up, Bill?
Hey, what's going on?
Dale!
Oh, Dale. Oh, it's Dale.
Yeah.
Dale rocks you. What's up, man? Do you have a question for Jason?
Dale does rock you. Right. Jason, just one quick question I wanted to ask you was, I know you're an instructor on Blue Fire, and I was wondering, are you ever afraid to give anything away to your opponents, like regulars and stuff, and do you ever have to like keep anything back strategy-wise, and was that like a big consideration when you were choosing to become an instructor?
Yeah, I have no problem answering that. It's definitely something that you have to think about, but I don't really hold back in the videos. I do make a point of not filming myself playing against the people I play every day, and then giving away reads or what I think, or talking about how I think they'll react to my play, because that could do nothing but really, really hurt me. So I generally play at stakes in videos or games that I'm not playing in right at the moment. And I say that. I don't pretend like I play with all these guys all the time. I come in and say, hey, they're unknowns, but let's attack how to beat them. And I don't really hold back too much. There's some things I don't end up talking about, but that's only because I'm not making videos with guys where I have really, really deep history. And against guys you have really deep history, played thousands of hands, tens of thousands of hands, the scenarios change, and I don't want to be giving away the information against those guys, so it doesn't come up. It was something I considered when I decided to first start making training videos at Blue Fire. I wasn't necessarily looking to make videos. It was something I considered on and off for a couple years with various sites. And when I agreed to do Blue Fire, I was actually in a mode where I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. But it was Phil Galfond who basically asked me to come on, and he was going to be part of the crew, and it's just kind of hard to say no to Phil, because he's awesome, and it was going to be a great opportunity to work with him. So I went on to Blue Fire and did all of that. I'm wondering if I'm missing one last part of that question, or if I'm not, or if I got it all.
Let me ask you a question. What about blogging? Because
thanks, Dale.
Just called in. He
no worries.
He runs a big blog. He runs he's got a lot of followers in his blog. But a guy like you, who you're making just tons of money. You're an instructor. Why blog? And it seems like you do it quite often. Is it out of boredom? Is it just you feel like you owe it to the people that are following you?
Honestly, it's mostly because that was part of my agreement with Blue Fire when we started. I don't know if I'm supposed to say something else, but I'm pretty candid, I guess. Yeah, like it was just that was part of the deal. I'd make videos and I'd blog. Now that I've done it, I've got people who like to read it now, and family and friends follow me through there. So it's turned into a good avenue for me to just at least keep people informed about my life, at least friends and family. Now that I've got a fair amount of readers who aren't friends and family, I had planned to keep doing it, and I'll just keep it up. And it's kind of nice. On occasion, it's a pretty good release. I feel bad because I think pretty often I come across as whiny in my blog, just because that's the venue for me to do it. I don't talk to my friends and family about my everyday poker life. I just don't. Telling them about the ups and downs, and even just bringing that into those relationships. Like when I don't want it to be a situation where when my friends hang out with me, they get a different Jason depending on how I'm doing that month. And I really try to avoid that. So what happens at the poker table, I try and leave at the poker table, and the blog is kind of my one avenue where I can just, spew the bad stuff. So.
All right, now back to the main event. I wanted to ask you, what do you do during your breaks? Because it seems like there's so many annoying breaks. Like, what are you doing for the 20-minute breaks, the dinner break? Are you just walking down to the, to the steakhouse or buffet? I mean, how do you spend that time?
Yeah, the breaks were the biggest issue of the World Series this year, at least the main event. And for what it's worth, I think the Rio did Harris, I guess, did a great job at the main event this year. It really keeps getting better each year. But breaks were a failure this year. They had far too many. I understand they're not going to change, that they're going to have a break every 2 hours, and I'm okay with that. It's kind of nice to stop and reset. Most of the time, I went and hung out with other players that I know who were in the event. Generally, I'm playing events that I know other guys in. So whoever's playing in that event that day or whatever, I'll just meet up with them every single break. Usually I try and keep it smaller groups of a few guys. and guys that I really trust to talk to poker with. If you're hanging out with just a bunch of random poker players that you kind of know, especially if you don't necessarily think they're all good or don't know how good they are, it kind of just turns into like 20 minutes of people telling each other bad beats, and it's really, really frustrating. You know, like, it's not what you want to do. But when it's a couple of good friends who you know are very good at poker, it can be a spot where you get to take a few minutes away from the table and say, okay, this is what's happened. You know, this is how I think I'm going to deal with this moving forward with my chip stack, my seat position, this history with this player, and they can either, you know, confirm your thoughts or tell you what they think you should do if it's different, and then you do the same for them. And it's actually kind of a nice little thing. The dinner breaks generally stay at the Rio, only because, you know, you only have so much time, and there's a bunch of people lining up to get cabs. If I'm with friends who have a car out there at the time, oftentimes we'll take off and go somewhere else, which is nice to leave the Rio. But usually end up staying there, and I pretty much always try and go to Gaylord's, the Indian restaurant there. Maybe I should have a Gaylord's patch on. It's by far the best food in the Rio, and I have no problem plugging them. Most of the food at the Rio isn't very good, but the stuff at Gaylord's is hella good.
What are you
going there a ton this summer.
What are you gonna do, Jason, between now and November 9? Are you gonna do like computer simulations of the chip stacks? Are you gonna have guys come over and play this situation out 100 times, or are you just gonna rely on your experience?
I'm going to do my best to not be sober for like 90 days straight.
Huh.
No, in reality, I don't know. With strategy, I'm just going to... People have asked me if I'm going to hire a coach or do anything like that. I'm certainly not going to do that. I have too many poker friends that I respect a lot to even go out considering hiring somebody. So I'm going to, you know, strategize with those guys. I don't see running a bunch of computer simulations or anything, but I'll definitely work on making sure that, like, my, you know, 10 to 30 big blind poker play is, make sure they have a really, really thorough understanding of it. I already think I play poker quite well with 10 to 30 big blinds, but I don't know, I don't have everything memorized, like all these, like, unexplainable shove charts and stuff that are out there. I don't necessarily plan on using that stuff. I don't necessarily think it's always the best strategy, but it's important to know how they developed a lot of it and why it's there so that you can deviate appropriately. So I'll definitely beef up on that, and then I'll also find out what I can about the players at the table. Things might change for a lot of them between now and the event, and I guess they might assume the same about me. But if nothing else, I mean, I guess I have to watch all the World Series footage when it comes out. If nothing else, to pay attention to myself and see if by some shot I have some ridiculous leak, like, you know, eating an Oreo every time I have a good hand. So I guess I'll pay attention to that, pay attention to the other players, and strategize with friends.
Now, before we let you go, I want to bring up, and you know, you're ninth at the main event, and you know, you're on your way to $1 million, a bunch of sponsorships, but you did tell us before the main event you donked off $1,000 at the 2-5 game, reshoving Ace-Jack against Ace-King. So for any donks who have done that over and over again, like myself, hey, they're still hoping finally the final table, right?
Yeah, we were talking about that because
I just have to hate on you a little bit. I have to hate a little bit.
Oh, nothing wrong with that.
I mean, you know how good you're running.
Yeah, I'm running great. I was running bad then too. So like, I played a little bit of live cash. I played some of the 5-10 to quarter PLO, but I didn't have a ton of cash out there outside of like the 30K I brought for buy-ins and stuff. So I only had so much, and that game played really deep, and I decided to sit in, not short stacked, over 100 big blinds each time, but with a few bullets that I had, and it didn't go my way, but the game was really good. And one night, Billy, who you guys know, really wanted to play live poker. Hadn't played poker in quite a while at this point. He really wanted to go play some 2-5, and I'm like, it was 2-5-10. I was like, I really didn't want to, but I went and played 2-5-10 no limit with him. And yeah, I did not play very well. Just played a lot of hands. It was really hard to stay focused, you know, because, you know, the stakes of the game just didn't matter to me. And like, I did some kind of goofy stuff, like basically where I shoved Ace-Jack. Basically, I had lost a few hands, lost maybe like 500 or 600 at that point, but I had reloaded for more, and I got in a spot where I had bluffed some live female poker player. I think she's like a live pro, so somebody who plays 2-5 live usually is like really, really tight, waits for sets and just like puts a bunch of money in the pot. And I bluffed her pretty big on a hand and then showed it, and 2 hands later, she re-raised me pre-flop, and I decided she just really wanted to get back at me, and I just like snap-shoved ace-jack. It had to have been bad, because almost always poker players, like what I assumed she was at the time anyway, just aren't going to do that. They're just going to be like, oh, I'll wait till I get a hand and I'll get this guy, you know. So I shoved on her, and she like took quite a while, and then finally said, okay, I'll gamble with you and call it ace-king. So yeah, I'm not very good at poker, I guess.
It's so
the only thing
funny
that matters about that is I was really, really frustrated. Like, that was far more tilting than losing like 30K online in a day, in a bad day. Just like losing $1,000 in that 2-5 game just drove me insane.
It's so funny how he played 8 days in the main event. He's done 100 interviews, but he still remembers that one hand he lost to the live pro chick for 1K.
Well, I wasn't thinking about it, but you had to come in and remind me. So
right, no, I just had to bring you down a little bit to our level.
No, no problem.
One thing I was curious about, and we'll let you go here in a minute. After you finish 9th and they stop the final table, do you just go right to the cage, collect your money? Do they send you a check? Do they wire to you? Like, what's the money transaction? How does that all go down at the Rio?
Actually, I have it in a backpack sitting by my front door in the house. My address is... No,
nice. Just type that right there on live stream.
Yeah. What they end up doing is right after the final table was set, and, you know, we all know we're going to the final table, and it's all exciting. Everybody gets happy. Then there was just a ton of cameras in my face, people doing interviews. They did an official count of all the chips, made you, like, stand in front of the security cameras with your chips so they get, like, you know, with your ID and all this stuff, because, I mean, they got to make sure they have this all, you know, tracked appropriately. Mm-hmm. And then they said, nobody leave. I wanted to go to the bathroom. They wouldn't even let me do that. So I did a bunch of interviews, and then they made us take a bunch of pictures. It felt really weird. So we're all standing, like, in front of the table in the order our seats were, so I was on the end. And we're all tired and feeling nuts. And there's probably, like, 15 or 20 photographers, like, feet away from us, like, snapping flashes over and over and over again. It felt like some weird scene from a movie, especially when I, like, hadn't slept in days. And so then they said, okay, you come back tomorrow at 4 at the Rio. And so we all left. I walked home with, you know, the few people who stuck it out watching me and, you know, had smiled, laughed, had a couple beers, slept for a couple hours, went and did this thing again. And that's where they told us we'd come in, they'd maybe take a, you know, have like an exit interview type thing with ESPN, and then they would give us, you know, we'd get our cash. And that's what I thought was happening. But first it was like an hour-long meeting where they told us a bunch of crap and, well, important stuff, but how the next few months are going to be. You know, don't go out getting DUI and things like that because it'll be all over the news. And then they had us do just a ton of interviews, and I had no idea that was coming, and like photo shoots, etc. And then they finally said, okay, let's get you paid. Sat down on the computer, they said, however you want to do it. Do you want to take all cash? Do you want some cash, some wire? Do you want a check? Yada, yada.
Nice.
And, yeah, I did a combination of a couple of those and took off.
Did they ask you, we talked about this in another show, are you allowed to cut a deal? Like, typically, guys will cut deals. You know, you can do it anywhere. You can do it online, you do it live. Did they say specifically we discourage you from doing it, or you're not? Do you have to sign a contract that you're not allowed to do it, or are you free to do that right now if you want to?
I think we're free to. They did not say a word about it. My guess is, though, that I wouldn't want to take a deal from anybody just simply because I'm a short stack. You know, usually from what I know, I think pretty often the short stacks and the way deals are put together kind of get screwed in deals because chip EV isn't the same as money EV at this point. Like, having a stack, I still could win this thing, you know, even just having 15 blinds. But if I took a deal, it'd probably be for like 150,000 more than I have now or something stupid, and it's just not going to happen. I'm hoping to win this thing.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, if you remember, I believe last year Joe Cata was like, I know there's like 6 players left. He was a short stack. I mean, you have 7.5 million chips. You double up, you're at 15. Double up again, you're at 30. And anything can happen.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, yeah, I'm not thrilled going in as a short stack. I'm a little upset about it actually, but it's still just a great spot. And you know, what comes from me having a short stack is that I am going to have to catch some luck early, as opposed to being able to play a lot of situations, take advantage of, you know, the skill edge I think I may have on individual players at the table, like in post-flop spots. I don't really get to do any of that. I'm going to have to go in there and be willing to put my money in light and hope that whenever I do get called or whenever I shove, people fold or I get called and I win. So I'm going to need to double up at least once or twice. And so, yeah, I'll have to count on some luck.
All right, Bret, we should let him go. The guy's got a bunch of interviews to do. He's been more than kind with his time. Congratulations. It's a ridiculous run. We're sweating you the whole time. And, hell, we may have to fly out to Vegas in November now. I mean, this is ridiculous. I want to feel part of this action.
Absolutely, you guys do. Oh, of course you guys got to fly out. If nothing else, so that I can go play blackjack with Bret again.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my God. I'm still tilting from losing 3 hunch when we did that. Well, we might be right there high-fiving you when you win the thing, so...
Congratulations, man.
So if you guys don't show up, I'm not going to.
Then we got to be there.
All right, follow Jason on Twitter at PBJax. That's 2 X's. And, of course, bluefirepoker.com. He's an instructor, and you can also read his blog there. So thanks for coming on, Jason. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for having me. It's always fun.
Okay, take care, Jason.
Cool. Take care, bud. All right, guys, we got about 100 people watching us on the Ustream.